Feel free to move the microphone around wherever you'd like and throughout your testimony as well. Go ahead and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
With one clarification, if I may.
On your oath?
No, on my... Excuse me. I don't understand. So
you'll be fine. We'll get you through this. Don't worry about it. Are you the same Alan Hayek who pre-filed testimony and exhibits on this matter?
Yes, I am.
All right. Do you have any corrections to the testimony?
It's more of a clarification than it is a correction. On the second question of this, it sounds like my father bought the farm in 1955. Actually, he started farming in 1955. He bought the farm in the 80s and farmed it ever since, and I bought it from the estate in approximately 2015. So just a minor clarification there.
Perfect. Thank you. If asked the same questions here today, would you provide substantially the same answers?
Yes, I would.
Would you like to move admission of your pre-filed testimony and exhibits?
Yes, I would.
Is there objections? Seeing no objections, the board will admit the evidence, give it the weight due. Okay, I think you sat up here, you've seen how we've done this morning, but now we will turn you over to the parties to conduct their cross-examinations. When the parties are finished, the board may have questions, and then at the conclusion of the cross-examinations, you'll be allowed to clarify any of your answers to the questions that were asked today. But as we've stated before, this is not the time for new testimony. So with that, parties. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Mr. Hayek.
Excuse me, what? Just for clarification a little bit, it's Hike.
Hike?
Just Hike.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'm from Cedar Rapids with all the Czech people there, so we call it Hayek. Your written testimony indicated that your farmland is no-till. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've been no-tilling and strip-tilling since probably approximately the last 15 years. My father, when he was alive, and when we took over the farm, we leased it from him, crop shared it with him.
Okay.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Anyway, my father was a person that looked to the future and looked to new innovation and things. And when we first started doing it, I was a little concerned of how receptive he would be of this no-tilling and strip-tilling process and in other things. And he took to it without any issue. He was one of the first ones in the neighborhoods sometimes to try and do different things. And this is what we want to continue to do. We're out here to preserve the land and take care of it. We're given one chance at this, and I feel it's my responsibility that we do the best job we can to take care of it.
Does the fact that your land is no-till present any unique or special problems in terms of the pipeline going across that land?
Well, excuse me. When we started doing this, I felt like this took a long-term process to get it to where it is today. We felt like we have very good soil structure out there. If you go out and dig in the farm right now, one sign that we have good soil structure and we got good organic matter built up in there is we'll have earthworms as little tiling machines going through our farm, which I think has helped drain the farm. Now when the pipeline comes through, if it comes through, it will destroy all that, and we'd have to basically start all over to do this again. And it would take some serious tillage practices, I feel, to help bring it back to begin with.
Explain to me what would be involved in doing that.
Well, in some of my testimony that was further back in there, approximately 3 years ago, Northern Natural came to my door and wanted to put a couple of lateral lines on my farm and a gas house on my farm, which I wasn't in favor of, but it served a public purpose and a public use. My son lives on the farm, has the farm is hooked to natural gas, so even though I wasn't real in favor of it, I went ahead and signed an easement. The land agent I worked with was really good to work with. Showed me what they were going to do, told me what they were going to do, showed me what they were doing all along the process. The problem is, right after they got done and doing it, they had to reroute one of my main tile lines because of it, a 12-inch line. And but right after they did this, though, we tried to go through with the combine and the catch cart the next year, and we dug ruts in the farm. It was they just ruined the soil structure. So we couldn't even no-till in it again. We had to rip it up to try to bring it back a little bit at a time.
And how long ago was that?
That was about 3 years ago they came through.
And so what's the condition of that area now?
Well, it's better now. I don't think it's back to where it was. The problem I did have is, like I said, they rerouted the tile line around the gas house, of which I even have a map of it. The map that Summit gave me from their legal counsel that I received from the Exhibit H's doesn't even show the laterals on it or the gas house on it. But anyway, when they did this, we had I called it a minor rain event. After the next year, the first year, of course, we had no crops because they destroyed, they took the crop out. But we had a minor rain event, and out in this one corner of the farm where we hadn't had, there is tile there, we didn't have drowned out spots. Well, that next year we had 4 drowned out spots, and there's numerous tiles in there, and it would drown out, but it would have to be a major rain event to make it drowned out, and we drowned it out in a minor event.
So what is your drain tile situation on your property? Where is it? What kind of tile is it?
Because I call it 6 natural gas lines on my farm already. I got 4, I call them 4 main natural gas lines. And of course, infrastructure's got to follow infrastructure. So my concern is one agent or somebody told me at one time, it was a state representative told me that infrastructure tends to follow infrastructure. And I told him how many gas lines or gas pipelines are you going to run through my farm if this is the way the process works. Well, because these pipelines all intersect each other across the farm, I do have a dredge ditch, so we do a little workaround. We can run a little tile one direction, we can run a little tile this direction, and luckily my dad, years and years ago, put a 12-inch main the whole length of the farm, under the gas lines, or through them. I'm not quite sure under, over, where they're at. But so we've been able to hook on far corners beyond the gas lines fairly easily without spending a lot of money to do it.
Do you have any sense of how much more impact there would be from the construction of this CO2 pipeline compared to the natural gas pipelines that you've seen?
The impact of it is going to be, for one, they're going through this 12-inch main again, and of which 3 years ago Northern Natural went through it, and they said they'd fix it. Actually, they did say they'd fix it. My problem is getting, as you can read in my testimony, it's been a little bit of an issue to get somebody in there to even check it. But they're going to cross that 12-inch main, plus I've got numerous laterals out there all through the farm that, my dad has put in over the years, and I've put in over the years.
You mean the tile?
The tile,
yeah.
Excuse me.
Did you discuss all of this with Summit land agents?
No, I didn't.
What has been your experience with the Summit land agents?
As everybody probably knows, they get robocalls and this kind of stuff. I get lots of them all the time. The first few calls that I've got, my wife and I started receiving numerous phone calls the first week. It was just constant, every couple, 3 hours, whatever. Her phone, my phone, and I wouldn't take them, but I'd listen to voicemails, and at first I thought it was a scam. And then I come to realize this isn't a scam. They're really trying to do this. So I talked to one land agent, and I don't know how many phone calls we got in 1 week. It was just nonstop for the entire week. It just went on and on and on. We started studying and reading and learning a little bit about what this thing is doing, and right from the start, I didn't believe in this project. I don't believe it's doing what it should be doing. I don't believe just moving CO2 from one place to another is accomplishing anything. I think if you want to do something with CO2, you need to remove it, period. You need to reduce it, not misplace it. So my wife and I haven't had much conversation with them. I've had probably 3 conversations with a land agent. I know I did. She called me once, she called me numerous times. But I did call her back once or twice. I think if I remember, it's 3 or 4 times I did talk to her. And I just told her, I says, I don't believe in this. I don't believe in the project. And I wasn't interested. And, we kept getting phone calls. And, but I did go to numerous, 2 or 3 informational meetings, different things like that. Went to PHMSA meetings. I went to one of them, even down to an IUB meeting once, trying to learn as much as I can about it. And I still don't believe in this project.
So you spend a lot of time as a result of this?
More time than I care to even begin to count. I've listened. I still work. I kind of semi-retired in the past year. But I'm still working. I grew up on the farm. I worked hard. I learned what the meaning of hard work was.
In your written testimony, I think you had some comments about the relationship to this project, to the ethanol industry. Can you clarify that for me a little more?
Can I back up with you just a minute, if that's all right?
Sure.
My wife and I have spent, my wife probably more hours than I have. I've read a lot, I've listened a lot. She's got a laundry basket full of this kind of stuff. Our goal, I thought at one time we was going to farm until I was 75, and then this project came along. Lots of things have changed. This has disrupted our family. I says I've spent numerous hours sitting through this thing, listening to it. Not so much sitting here, but I listened to it there hasn't been very much of it I've missed. We just, more hours than I can even care to count. When I feel like I'm supposed to be retiring, and enjoying what I want to do and what I like to do, and this is not what I want to do. Excuse me, your next question.
That's okay. Well, to follow up on that, do you feel like at this point you have no choice about what's going to happen?
I don't feel like I have any choice. Years ago, we've listened to the Sierra Club. We listened to the Sierra Club things, and we've talked to other landowners, and we've been in legal situations before. And my wife and I decided, because we're just small potatoes in a big pond, where we're not going to make a difference here. I wouldn't hire a lawyer. I think a lot of Brian Jorde in your group. I appreciate everything you do. I've been through the legal system. I know how it works. The little guy doesn't win. What ends up happening is the guys with the most amount of money is the ones that come up at the end of the day. It's not about who's right or wrong in this process. It's who's got the most amount of money. And right now, Summit looks like, with all their lawyers sitting up here, they've got lots of money. There's no amount of money, even $1 spent, in my opinion, is a waste of $1. And I've worked too hard for everything I've got for the farm. I says, I wouldn't give it away for anything.
So, back to my previous question.
Sorry.
That is fine. In your testimony, I think you had some comment about your view of this pipeline in connection with the ethanol industry. Can you clarify that a little more for me?
Can you clarify that a little more for me, please? Let me hear it again anyway.
Sure. In your testimony, do you recall that you had some comments about the relationship between this pipeline project and the ethanol industry?
When they first started with all the ethanol plants, I'm not against the ethanol plants. I think they serve a purpose. I didn't quite believe in the extent that they were built up and the amount of Can I get a little water, please?
Yeah, Chuck, can we get Mr. Hayek some water? Please.
the amount of natural resources this takes, the amount of water these take to use these, I think it's a valuable tool for us to use. I think ethanol serves a purpose. But my concerns of it, even when the ethanol plants came in, is the volume of natural resources. Our water is what maintains us. You know, without water, we have nothing. And from what I understand of this, it'll take a huge amount of water again to do it. And we have a natural resource out here in land and water both. I feel I have an obligation to do what I can to I want to preserve my farm and everybody else's farm. I want to preserve our water resources. I'm very passionate about the farm and keeping it intact and protecting what we've been given.
So why have you not signed an easement?
When I first got the easements, I didn't believe in it, for number one. And I looked at it, and my wife and I looked at it, and I says, the money'd be nice, but I says, I don't feel like I'm protecting the farm. I don't feel like I'm doing right by God and myself and my family of which lives, my son and his wife and 5 kids live on the farm next to this pipeline. So I don't want them exposed to it. I wouldn't want exposed. I don't want it in my backyard. I definitely don't want it in my son's backyard. And one of the informational meetings I think it was even with the IUB, was mentioned that, it'd be a nice retirement income. My wife and I have said, we haven't missed a meal yet. We can live. But this farm, we have rights to protect this farm. It's necessary. We're going to do everything we can to protect it. So I won't sign an easement.
So you mentioned that there are some residences fairly close to where the pipeline would be?
Yes, there's numerous residences all around the properties.
Can we bring up the KMZ file? So, on the KMZ file, there's a residence, it looks like, well, first of all, let me ask, does this look like your understanding where the pipeline route would be, that white line?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So, to the east of that, it looks like there are some buildings. Is that a residence?
That's my son's house. It was actually built, the house was built in, I think, the mid-90s. I think I'll just leave it at that. My dad lived there till 2013 when he passed away, and we had to rent it out for a little while because of when my dad passed away, it created lots of issues like you have in many families. But approximately 5 years ago, my son and his wife and 5 kids now live there, and I've since retired. And my plans are to help them maintain and grow the farm to their liking and not necessarily mine. But my goal is to protect the farm.
So about how far would your son's residence there to the east be from the pipeline route, do you think?
I would assume it's approximately a half a mile or less.
And then up in the northwest corner is another area of buildings. Is that a residence also?
That's also a residence.
And that looks like it's even closer?
Yeah, it'd be a little bit.
Okay. Where is the nearest location where emergency response personnel would come from?
Well, the small town of Duncombe is 3.5 miles north. And I couldn't say for sure, but I'm pretty confident it's all volunteers. The major hub, of course, is Fort Dodge. So the farm is 10 or 12 miles to the east of Fort Dodge here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Kaufman is first.
You talked about water and the environment, and does your farm have well on it?
Yes, it does. It does have a well.
What are your concerns about that?
Well, to the concerns we have it to use, years ago when my dad built the farm, we had lots of issues with the well. So years ago, Xenia came around and offered to hook us up to Xenia water system. So we have an Xenia line going through the eastern edge of our property. So the well is garden, watering, just minor stuff. We keep it in place. It's not a real good well, but it does serve a purpose for us.
And you are aware that they can build put another well on their if you don't have an easement, if they take it by eminent domain, they could take another well, or is that right? Is that your understanding?
Well, I'm always concerned about the wells. We had the gypsum mines out here that have they dig out limestone and stuff, and so limestone rock to make sheetrock and so forth. So people in the area have had well problems, and one other farm that I used to rent, the shallow well, it eventually went dry. So I says, it's not quite the issue we have, but at the same time, my son has worked on the farm. He's talked about, some sort of livestock. I don't know what his plans, but his plans are his and not necessarily mine. He's going to grow what he wants to grow on the farm. So a well may be in the future someday, another well.
And another question I had was about your family lives right there on the ground, and the safety issues. Do you believe they're safe?
I don't believe these lines are safe at all. I've heard of I've read about the Mississippi one. I says I'm concerned about shutoffs. I says they won't release the plume studies now. Yes, no, good, bad, I don't know, but they can't release it for terrorist information. But at the end of the day, you can look up anything. So I says we're probably rural enough. We'd probably be all right, but if there is a break, I says, there's people next to towns, schools, churches. I says, we're just a small area. The risks out there are probably minimal, but the risks are still the risk. And if it's man-made, it'll break. Sometime it's going to break. I just don't want to be in the path of it when it does.
I just have one more question. Does it concern you that Summit has never built, operated, or maintained a pipeline prior to this?
Yeah, it deeply concerns me that you know, they, even to go through my property, they've never done it before, and all my tile lines, I says, I've got numerous tile lines out there. They say they're going to put it 4 foot deep. I would guess probably 75-80% of my tile is 3 to 5 feet deep. So guess where 4 foot's going to land? It's gonna hit my tiles. I've had major tile issues already with Northern Natural a couple years or 3 years ago. I know I'm going to have problems. It just, you disturb the tile bed. I says, a pipeline of that length and of that magnitude, the safety of it, I says, there's just too many questions, too many risks. I says, I don't know whether shut-offs on it or man-controlled or automatically controlled. I says, I would sure hope valve lines are under automatic conditions, because if you rely on a person to make a decision, one decision a few seconds too late could affect a lot of people.
Do you believe this will economically affect your family if it's allowed to go through?
I depend on the farm for my livelihood. I don't have the farm paid for, so I have payments to make yet. I've done some tile work. I says, when I have to work around these gas pipelines that I have now, it costs a couple of grand more to go through each one. And I've got 4 main ones to go clear across my farm and 2 laterals. Well, they charge a couple $1,000s per each one, and more hours of time to do it. So it costs a lot more money to do this. And I'm not made of money to spend. You buy a farm without any tile in it, they just come out and plant their plow in the ground, and they got GPS, and they can tile this farm from one end to the other nonstop. You can't do this with this farm. I got too many natural gas lines out there now.
Just one last question. Do you believe that private property rights are essential for freedom in this country?
I feel if we don't stop this thing in its tracks, I says, this will open up to any individual, any large corporation with money to take our property and use it for whatever they want. And for this project, I says, there's no benefit to it. This is all taxpayer dollars to pay for this. Everybody in this country is going to pay for this project for the next umpteen years. There is no benefit unless they can figure out a way to do something different with this. Let's reduce CO2. Let's not try to misplace it someplace else.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Grunhagen? Ms. Kaufman, your mic.
Hi, Mr. Hayek. My name is Chris Grunhagen. I'm representing the Iowa Farm Bureau, and I just have a couple of follow-up questions to your testimony. On page 3 of your testimony, you talk about that you have 3 gas mains going through your property, and I think you just said you had 4. And so I just want to know if you wanted to correct your testimony, your written testimony there.
Slight correction. I forgot about that one too. At the time, when I looked up the PHMSA maps, the lines were so close together, I thought it was just one. And then Northern, for whatever reason, I just learned this a couple of weeks ago, they were out flagging the roadside next to the 2. Well, there must be 2 out there. There's 2 natural gas lines that go from, I gotta think directions.
Why don't we go ahead and pull up the KMZ and maybe that will help. If you can kind of show us where you think it is.
Actually, I might be able to do you one better.
Okay.
I just, I probably got this probably a couple of weeks ago. It's a natural gas line, and it actually came from a Jennifer Sweeney. I just brought it with me, but it is the natural gas lines, on the farm.
Are you seeking to enter that into the record?
I can.
Okay. Well, you don't have copies for the parties, do you? Hold on.
I just have one here.
Okay. Before we admit that, we're going to have to distribute copies. You didn't happen to electronically file that, did you? No. Okay.
Your Honor, would you like me to go on to other subjects and come back to this?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. You also mentioned on that same page about a 12-inch main. And when you say 12-inch main, you mean drainage tile main?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know approximately where that is located on your properties?
Yes. Yes.
Could you describe it verbally for us? And I think there's a pointer there too.
If you go on the north side of the property, I can probably describe it just as easily. Approximately 100 foot in from the road, it traverses the whole length of the farm to the east to the dredge ditch. The only thing that it does just before this proposed CO2 pipeline goes in, there's a gas house, which the legal documents that I got from Summit's Legals doesn't show that, but my when they get the map out, it will help. But they rerouted the gas main around the gas house. So other than being a straight shot from east to west or west to east, there's a little bump out around the gas house. And then numerous tiles hooked onto it.
We'll wait to talk about the natural gas lines until your exhibit comes out. But the drainage tile main then, where does it start at approximately?
It actually starts in the property to the west. I don't know if I can do this. It's not cooperating. Anyway, you go to the far west side of my property, the red, and if you go south approximately, and it's in my property yet, if you go south, maybe a quarter of a mile, it juts off into the property to the west. That's my brother's property. So he had a slew hole that connected that across and then to the north and then straight shot to the dredge ditch.
And the proposed pipeline route will cross where that 12-inch main, tile main is?
Yes, it will.
Okay. And all of your laterals that you mentioned, how many laterals are there?
Numerous.
Okay. They all connect in with the 12-inch main?
No, that's just one of the mains out there. I have really 3 mains out there. The 12-inch main they're going to cross. There's another main that's closer to the ditch. They probably won't get that one. The third one, that one cost me, I don't know how close they're getting. I'm hoping it won't come close enough to hit the edge of it, because that one cost a lot to put in. And I paid for that one at the time.
And do you know approximately where that is located at on the properties? There it is.
I run a main up through here, and it comes up through here and down to the west and south, and it kind of bends and curves in there, and it's deep. Some of it's deep because it's a hillside. They had to actually come in with a track hoe and dig down 3 or 4 feet to get water flow. I don't think they're going to get to it, but it's going to be close.
So it's possible you may have a second tile main that's
I may
affected.
have.
And about how deep is that tile?
It varies. The deepest part of it's probably, they had to take a track hoe down to get the hillside down. So it's probably, some of it's 8 foot deep, but that's it. I know they're not into that area, but they're in a shallower portion of it. But I have maps. I just didn't bring them with. To me, it's unimportant if I don't want it.
Understand. I'm just trying to identify this for the record, so in the event that the board does grant it, that these kinds of things are in the record and that they're aware of it. So, and all of those mains go to the lateral then that is labeled to the east on the map?
Everything goes to the dredge ditch.
And you own that property that has the dredge ditch there?
Right. Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. And I have one more question about the tile, and then we'll talk about the natural gas lines. In your testimony on that same page, you expressed concern that it costs an extra $2,000 to cross your tile to go across the pipelines.
Yes.
Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that the pipeline company is responsible for that extra cost?
I didn't realize that.
And so I assume you would want the pipeline company to pay for that extra cost.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So does everyone have I think these have been handed out now on the natural gas lines. Okay. Mr. Hayek, if you would like these to be entered into evidence, you'll need to explain what they are first, and then offer them in as a hearing exhibit, and get a ruling from the board on that.
What she said.
We give very wide latitude to the non-attorneys. The attorneys, not so much. And I appreciate you jumping through the hoops. For those of you who don't practice in front of us all the time, I know it seems odd, the dances that we do in terms of evidence. But those are kind of the rules and the procedures, so I appreciate everybody's patience. So just to clarify, you're making a motion that your hearing exhibit be admitted.
Yes.
Great. Are there objections? Okay. The board will admit Hayek hearing exhibit 1. Give it the way due. Thank you.
Thank you. And so your hearing exhibit 1 is a map of the natural gas pipelines going through your property?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And can you identify on this picture which ones are your property, or where your property is located? I think we can see the lateral going down the right side there.
Just
Not the ladder, I'm sorry, the dredge ditch.
Yeah, the dredge ditch, the darker green is the edge of my property, the west edge of it. So I have two main pipelines running to the southwest and two other pipelines running to the southeast.
So they cross each other.
They cross each other. Now, what this map still doesn't. And then there's two other laterals in this farm or in this picture here that they put in 3 years ago, and it doesn't show a picture of the gas house, but that's where the gas house is, right along the road. The reason those were put in is they abandoned the natural gas line to the far west.
So the gas line that you're referring to the far west, that's the line that's not on your property?
Yes.
And so there are the two yellow lines going from the northeast to the southwest. There's a shorter, thicker yellow line that starts by the road. Is that the gas house?
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of in between the two laterals and the two mains that are out there. Yes.
And so it looks like there's some lateral lines going from that gas house to the line that runs from the northwest to the southeast. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And will the Summit route then cross a lot of this infrastructure?
They will cross two of the natural gas lines that go to the south east. The other two lines, possibly down the road, not my property anyway, I don't think.
Thank you for identifying that. Appreciate that. And your concern is because you have experience with these pipelines and the impacts that it has on your farm. Could you explain what your concerns are?
Well, Northern Natural came out 3 years ago, and they were real good to work with. They says, we'll fix all your gas or tile lines, and and they, over the years, they've been real good to work with. I says, they haven't had to do much. They come out and do a little inspection one time. One time they did a couple of short, small digs or something like that, just minors. And they paid very well to come out and do that on the property. Of course, they destroyed some crop in doing it. But when they came out there, they were real good to work with. They walked me all around the pipelines, showed me the natural gas lines, where they were at, exposed on my farm. They showed where all my tile lines were on the farm, identified all of them. They had a tile operator come in and fix them. Since they cut through them, they had to repair them. So before they covered them up, we walked around and did a visual inspection. Everything looked, I couldn't believe I have any problem whatsoever. And the first year I put crop in, I get a minor rainfall, and I knew I had an issue. I've got an open intake, so I can see the bottom of the tile actually on the far west side of that 12-inch main. I got an open tile intake, so I can see down there. And once the water got down far enough, I could see how the water should flow. It was full, but the water was just sitting there. It shouldn't be sitting there. It should be flowing out. Now, I've got in my testimony here too, but my first tile operator won't have anything to do with them. He just don't. I assume he doesn't want the risk. He'll go work around them, go alongside them, go away from them, but not anything. The second guy said, he would come and do it. Well, that's fine, but everybody's busy. Okay, I was on the list, never showed up. Called him 2 or 3 times, said, yeah, I'll come, never showed up. I'm on to my 3rd tile guy, and I thought, well, part of my problem is maybe I'm not spending enough money. I've got one little piece I'd like to finish tiling out. I says, I've got a little extra cash. I says, if I can get you out to put a little more tile in there, will you at least come out and check this out for me, do some digging? He's got a camera. He says it's real easy to do. We can drop a camera down the hole and run, I don't know how many 100 feet, but he can run a few 100 feet and see what the problem is, hopefully. So I haven't got it fixed yet. I'm trying, but in today's world, everybody's so busy. Nobody's got time. Small jobs are immaterial, and I'm just a small potato out here. I says that if I was spending $100,000, I'd probably have them there tomorrow, but I'm not spending $100,000.
So you have concerns that if this proposed pipeline is approved, that you're going to have similar issues, if not worse issues, of having to identify a person to do the work, and as well as the increased cost and getting it done and getting it fixed properly?
Yeah.
Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, we crossed numerous tiles. My fear is my problems are going to be down underground. I says, I don't know when I'm going to find them. I says it's going to depend on rain events, to help identify them. And once they're out of sight, out of mind. What do they care? They got their pipeline in the ground.
So if Summit gets their pipeline project approved, would you then expect them to make that tile work properly, and even if it takes a long time to get that done?
I would expect I could have issues for years. If we don't get a lot of rainfall in the next 5 years, and I get one 6 years from now, I says, is the problem, where is the problem? Everything exists underground. It's out of sight. It's out of mind. I says, it's very, very difficult to identify the problems without a huge amount of expense to go find them.
Thanks. That's all the questions I have for today.
Mr. Jorde.
Sir, you mentioned that you engage and have historically in practices, crop preservation practices such as no-till farming. Is that right?
Yes.
Have you seen any research on no-till farming, and that if ethanol plants use no-till corn, that they could reduce their carbon intensity scores to the negative scores below 0? Have you seen any research on that?
I haven't seen any research on it, but if we're burning less fossil fuels to put the crop in and take the crop out, to me that looks like that would be a positive thing. And rather than using our tax dollars to subsidize a huge industry already, let's use our tax dollars to promote healthy soil activities.
You mentioned that you went to the PHMSA meetings in Des Moines, is that correct?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
I wanted to learn more. I said, that's all we've been doing for the last 2 years, is going to different meetings and trying to learn and understand. PHMSA doesn't have I don't think, all their regulations out according to CO2 pipelines that are going in. So I'm big at trying to learn and understand.
In your listening in and participating in these hearings, have you heard the testimony where Summit had PHMSA experts and saying how they would comply with all the PHMSA rules and regulations?
I've heard some of it, but there's been so much testimony, I says, and sometimes I'm busy too. I'm still working.
Okay, that's fine.
So I haven't got 100% of everything. Sometimes I get bits and pieces.
Now, you've made it very clear you've spent countless hours, you and your wife and your family. Would you say between the two of you over the last nearly 2 years or more now that it's over 1,000 hours of your collective time?
I would say so.
All right.
It's been, yes.
And you haven't been compensated or offered any economic compensation for any of that time investment, right?
No.
And not for any of the mental anguish that you talk about in your testimony, no compensation for that?
No, sir.
You said your son and his wife and family live on the property. They have 5 children. What are the ages of their children? Approximately. I'm not going to ask you their birthdays.
All the way from 17 down to 4.
Okay, all right. So
and everything in between.
Right. So as far as you know, they plan to be there for many more years, kids running and playing on that property.
My son he loves the farm. He wants to be part of it. We've kind of changed directions of the farm in the last year, I guess. I says I've gone from the farm being my enterprise to the practice of gradually working him into the next farming enterprise.
I take it from your answers that you believe there's some things that are just more important than money. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
When you made the comment that you just believe it's tough or maybe impossible for the little guy to win, are you aware that the landowners are undefeated in 3-0 in state agencies against these projects in the Midwest?
Yes, I am.
And that the IUB, if they were to approve this, would be the first of any state agency to actually grant approval, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Any other questions from the parties? I believe you already had a question.
You just get one question? I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
Well, you get one round of questions, okay, and then you can ask a question on information that has been asked since then.
This has been asked since then.
It needs to be very limited, but go ahead.
Yes, I'll keep it very brief. But I just wanted to know if, based on what you've just said, if you think that this is appropriate use for if we should consider if Iowa should consider granting these eminent domain for this purpose.
I just don't believe. I don't believe in the project. I think it's the wrong use of tax dollars.
Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Burns.
I just wondering if we can go back to the KMZ map. I just a little unclear on. There's a lot of lines running through there, and I just want to, for the sake of the record, to make sure that what I'd like to do is just, can we pull up his exhibit that had the natural gas lines, please? And I would just like to start on the west side of this property, or this picture.
Yes.
And so the furthest pipeline that the hand is on right now, that's a Northern Natural Gas line.
Yes, but it's been abandoned.
Okay, so that's one of the abandoned ones. Perfect. We're just going to work our way through this. The next one over, also abandoned or not?
It's still in use.
Still in use. Oh, I'm not close enough. Let's just keep going at the same diagonal direction. The hand is on that one. What is the situation with that one?
I'm not sure. It's a full natural gas line. I'd say I saw the line 24 or 30 inches. It's a big line that goes through there though.
And that one is active.
Yes.
Okay, the next one right next to it.
It's an active line.
And all 4 of these so far have been northern natural gas lines?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that one's approximately the same size, or don't know?
I only saw the one, the one big one they hooked the gas house into and the laterals onto. I'll take that back. The 2 lines that run to the southeast, I'd like to say they're maybe 8 inches. I'm kind of guessing.
Yep, oh, that's fine. And we're getting to those too. So these last 2 we discussed both go through your property, correct?
Yes.
And the property directly to the west of you, that is owned by your brother?
Yes.
Okay. And then let's go the other direction then. So those 2 are also northern natural gas lines. And so out of all of these lines, which ones are the newest ones that you've been part of?
The 2 newest ones off the main, that 30-inch line I just told you about, they planted a gas house and a fence. I call it a gas house, but so they took 1/10 of an acre out to plant this gas house right on top of my 12-inch main on top of it. And then run 2 laterals, and I can't tell you how those 2. I would assume those 2 laterals connect to both them other 2 lines that run to the southeast. I think, I don't remember. It was 3 years ago, so it's got to.
Okay, so to be clear, the newest lines running across your property are the 2 that are going to the southeast.
The short ones.
So the hand, you see the hand on the screen right there?
No. Excuse me. Let's try this.
Yeah, you could use your pointer.
These short lines right there.
Yep.
That's the 2 of the newest lines they put in 3 years ago.
Okay. So the other lines, you were not around when those went through.
Well, one of them back when I was a teenager.
Okay.
I don't remember much that far back.
I understand.
And we didn't, at that time, my dad didn't own this property. He owned a property to the north of that where it went through. So
okay.
I kind of remember that because of the other property. But it did come through this one at the same time. We bought this one in the 80s. Or Dad did.
That clears up a lot for me. Thank you for that. I'm just curious, the property to the west, you said is your brother's. The proposed pipeline does run through that parcel?
Yes, it does.
Did he sign a voluntary easement?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Just curious.
It's been a little bit of a controversy in the family with...
Understand.
You know how that goes.
I absolutely do. So, thank you.
Okay, so no more questions from the board. Now you have an opportunity to effectively redirect yourself. So of the questions that were asked to you this morning, you can clarify if somebody asked you something and you need clarified or redirected. Otherwise, that's it. We appreciate it.
Can I read a little something off some of my...
It's really not the appropriate time. We are not trying to be difficult. This is really not the time for new testimony.
It's not new.
If it's short. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be a stickler. And it's not enjoyable to enforce the hearing rules. It really is not. So if it's short, please continue.
I'll make it really quick. And
You're fine.
My son and his family are very important to us, and I just for his sake and mine, I just would like to address it. I'll read it. To me, this is a money grab for 45Q and Z tax credits without any real research to support the claims. There are alternatives to this pipeline which would make ethanol more prosperous, and those avenues should be explored and implemented well before eminent domain is used. Profiteers will continue to use tactics like this in order to strike fear in vulnerable farmers trying to force their way onto the land. This hazardous CO2 pipeline product does nothing to deliver what it claims. That is CO2 reduction. However, this is not the case. These projects don't get rid of it, they just place it underground. Our families worked long and hard to create a sustainable future for the farm and next generations. It should never be forgotten that protection to property and persons cannot be separated. Where property is insecure, the rights of persons are unsafe. Protection to the one goes with protection to the other, and there can be neither prosperity nor progress where there is uncertainty. Earlier, justice understood the correlation between the rights and property of people. It's vital to apply constitutionality when determining these projects. Our rights as owners, workers of the land, and contributors in society are directly related to our rights as citizens of this United States. There are viable alternatives that don't require eminent domain. This should be the first question of the board. Is there an alternative to the objective? This would be common sense. All people should weigh in on this.
Did you get all that? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. I do appreciate it.
Okay, we will go off the record now until 1:20, and when we return, we will return to Carrie Mulvaney Hearth. That's right.